The dim light of the Roman Senate Hall flickered against the cold marble walls, casting long shadows that danced and writhed like specters of unease. Julius Caesar, draped in his flowing crimson toga embroidered with golden laurels, walked confidently toward his seat, each step deliberate and echoing ominously in the cavernous chamber. The faint clinking of his golden sandals against the polished floor was the only sound, swallowed quickly by an oppressive, almost otherworldly silence. He had been warned of a conspiracy. Loyalists had whispered urgent pleas, their voices trembling as they urged him to cancel the meeting or double his guard. Rumors of treachery seeped through the city like poison, yet Caesar's pride, a colossus built on years of triumphs and an unshakable belief in his divine destiny, outweighed any caution. He paused momentarily at the entrance, his sharp gaze sweeping across the gathered senators. The torchlight gleamed off their faces, each one a carefully sculpted mask, hiding intentions too dangerous to reveal. The air was heavy, thick with an unspoken tension that seemed to thrum like a taut bowstring. As he entered, the senators rose in unison, their movements mechanical, their expressions rehearsed to perfection. The air grew denser, stifling, each man's gaze betraying the tension beneath their composed exteriors. Caesar's keen eyes scanned the room, instincts honed on battlefields and political arenas detecting the subtle shifts. A flicker of nervousness in one man's glance, the deliberate way another adjusted his robe to conceal trembling hands. Yet he pressed on, his back straight, his stride unbroken. A faint smirk tugged at the corners of his lips, as if daring his enemies to act. The moment broke when the senators moved to encircle him, their hands trembling as they reached beneath their robes for concealed daggers. The sound of clashing steel shattered the tense silence. Caesar's trusted Praetorian Guard, stationed discreetly at every entrance, burst into the hall, swords drawn and shields raised. Their sudden and precise intervention was no accident. Caesar's paranoia, often mocked by his closest allies, had once again proven its worth. In secret, he had expanded the ranks of his personal guard, selecting only men whose loyalty was beyond question, ensuring that no conspirator could catch him unprepared. The conspirators, now cornered and exposed, fought back in a frenzy born of desperation. Daggers flashed in the dim light, and chaos erupted. The guards moved with ruthless efficiency, their blades carving through resistance as blood splattered across the pristine marble floors, staining the intricate mosaics of Roman victories. The senators' cries of panic and pain reverberated through the chamber, a discordant symphony of shattered ambitions. The last conspirator fell, his lifeless body crumpling onto the cold stone, surrounded by the wreckage of the plot. As the final echoes of dying cries faded, a new sound filled the hall, slow, deliberate applause. Julius Caesar, standing tall amid the carnage, surveyed the scene with a gaze as cold and unyielding as steel. His crimson toga, now flecked with blood, seemed almost radiant in the dim torchlight. "Let this," he said, his voice steady and resonant, cutting through the silence like a blade, "be a lesson to all who would challenge Rome's destiny under my rule." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air, a declaration of absolute power and an unspoken promise of retribution. In that moment, it became clear, the era of compromise had ended, and the age of unrelenting authority had begun. With his enemies vanquished, Caesar enacted sweeping reforms that reshaped the foundation of Roman governance. He dismantled the Senate, replacing it with a council of hand-picked loyal advisors who owed their status entirely to his favor. The once vibrant halls of debate fell silent as laws were issued by decree, transforming Rome into an empire where the concept of democracy became a distant memory. For the patricians, this marked the loss of their privileged influence, while for the plebeians, the illusion of representation dissolved entirely. Provincial leaders, once hopeful of local autonomy, found themselves relegated to mere administrators of Caesar's will. At first, the people cheered his rule with fervent approval. Infrastructure projects flourished, with vast aqueducts stretching farther than ever before, delivering fresh water to even the most distant provinces. Lavish public works adorned cities with grand amphitheaters, triumphal arches, and sprawling gardens, each a testament to Rome's unparalleled dominance. Roads became arteries of commerce, uniting the empire under a meticulously planned network, while marketplaces overflowed with exotic goods from the farthest reaches of the known world. In newly conquered territories, schools were established to teach the Roman way, fostering integration but also eroding local identities. The legions, bearing Caesar's banner, extended Rome's reach to the Indus Valley and the British Isles, their victories heralding an age of expansion unmatched in history. A Pax Romana like no other reigned, its peace maintained through Caesar's unyielding authority. Yet beneath the grandeur of these accomplishments, shadows began to grow. Freedoms, once celebrated as the hallmark of Roman identity, were eroded under the guise of unity and stability. Religious practices were homogenized, with temples dedicated to local gods razed or repurposed into shrines glorifying Caesar's divinity. Cultures from Gaul to Egypt saw their languages and traditions suppressed, rewritten to align with Roman ideals. When defiance arose, it was met with swift and brutal repression. A rebellion in Germania was crushed with such ferocity that entire villages were erased, their stories reduced to whispers. Intellectual dissent, once flourishing in academies and forums, disappeared under the weight of censorship. The Great Library of Alexandria, once a beacon of diverse knowledge, was systematically curated to reflect only the doctrines approved by Caesar, its contrarian texts burned or hidden. The whispers of discontent spread like wildfire. Senators, reduced to figureheads, spoke in veiled tones of the republic that once was, their words heavy with regret. Scholars risked their lives to hide forbidden works in hidden chambers, preserving banned ideas for a future they feared would never come. Families gathered in the shadows of their courtyards, whispering in fear of informants, whose loyalty to the regime was rewarded with power and protection. Artists and playwrights turned to allegory, crafting tales of mythical kings whose unchecked ambition led to ruin, their veiled critiques becoming acts of quiet rebellion. In hidden forums, philosophers debated in hushed voices, asking if an eternal empire could truly thrive when built upon the suppression of its soul. The empire, though vast and prosperous, began to feel like a gilded cage. Monuments once seen as symbols of Roman greatness now stood as stark reminders of lost freedom. The sprawling Forum of Caesar, with its towering columns and statues, cast long shadows over a people who walked silently beneath them. The very structures that had brought stability became suffocating, as Rome's citizens and its conquered peoples alike struggled under the weight of an empire that demanded their submission at the cost of their identity. Generations passed, yet the empire remained under the unyielding rule of the Caesar dynasty, each descendant meticulously groomed to emulate their forebears' vision. The dynasty's iron grip ensured its longevity, but with eternal power came an inevitable descent into stagnation. Art, once a reflection of Rome's diversity and ingenuity, devolved into formulaic repetitions, endlessly glorifying Caesar's victories. Bold innovation and expression were stifled, replaced by a sterile monotony that left no room for creativity or dissent. Works that once celebrated the complexities of Roman life became hollow tributes to a singular legacy, their creators shackled by the expectation of conformity. Science, once the driving force of Roman progress, ground to a halt under rigid doctrines that deemed experimentation and radical ideas threats to stability. Philosophy, once a bastion of intellectual freedom, succumbed to monotony, its vibrant debates replaced by cycles of adulation for the empire's supposed perfection, leaving humanity's greater questions unanswered and unexplored. The streets of Rome, which had once thrived with the dynamic interplay of ideas, commerce, and creativity, became eerily silent. Markets still operated, but their energy had waned, stripped of the innovation and excitement that once drew traders and craftsmen from across the known world. Public spaces, once arenas for impassioned discourse and theatrical performances, were reduced to mere platforms for delivering imperial decrees. Citizens were no longer participants in their empire's destiny but subdued subjects, molded to fit the image of a perfect, unchanging Rome. Schools rigorously enforced a sanitized version of history, erasing complexities, failures, and alternative perspectives that might inspire critical thought or rebellion. Statues and monuments of Julius Caesar proliferated throughout the empire, their colossal forms dwarfing individuality and progress, serving as omnipresent reminders of the dynasty's suffocating dominance. Meanwhile, the empire's borders groaned under the weight of relentless expansion. In Britannia, rebellion swept through entire regions, fueled by outrage at oppressive taxes and the exploitation of forced labor. The Roman response was swift and brutal. Towns were razed, their populations scattered, leaving behind smoldering ruins as warnings to others. In Numidia, uprisings against imperial control prompted devastating scorched earth campaigns that rendered once fertile lands barren and devastated local economies. Entire provinces were transformed into militarized zones, their cultural vibrancy extinguished under the crushing weight of Roman legions. The cost of sustaining the illusion of an eternal empire drained the imperial treasury, forcing the imposition of punitive taxes that plunged already struggling populations deeper into poverty. Families were torn apart as conscription demands surged, feeding an insatiable military machine that demanded constant blood to maintain its dominance, further fueling unrest and despair. The people, wearied by the relentless demands of an empire that offered only servitude in return, found themselves trapped in a gilded cage. Across every province and social class, despair took root. Farmers toiled under oppressive quotas, watching their harvests cease to feed the legions and sustain the empire's insatiable appetite for war and expansion. Artisans, once celebrated for their innovation and creativity, were reduced to producing state-approved works glorifying the Caesars. Merchants conducted their trade under the scrutinizing gaze of imperial agents, their profits siphoned off to fund an increasingly bloated bureaucracy and the demands of endless conquest. Whispers of dissent were swiftly silenced, with informants ensuring that rebellion was quashed before it could take hold. Despite the pervasive silence, the echoes of discontent grew louder in hidden corners. Families gathered in hushed tones, their conversations shielded from prying ears. Artists and playwrights wove allegorical critiques into their work, subtly rebelling against the oppressive regime. Scholars risked their lives to preserve forbidden ideas, tucking them away in hidden chambers for a future that might never come. As the Caesar dynasty clung desperately to its fading grasp on eternity, the cracks in the foundation of its empire deepened, revealing a world that had traded freedom and innovation for an illusion of unassailable strength. The twist came when an underground network of philosophers, rebels, and visionaries began to question the cost of eternity. This clandestine group operated in the shadows, meeting in hidden catacombs, abandoned temples, and secluded countryside villas. Using coded messages hidden in everyday items like pottery and textiles, they devised elaborate methods to communicate undetected. Couriers risked their lives carrying these messages, navigating a labyrinth of checkpoints and imperial spies, knowing that capture would mean torture or death. Their operations required absolute secrecy, as betrayal could dismantle their fragile network in an instant. Their activities were perilous. Informants and spies constantly threatened to expose them, but their resolve was unshaken. At the heart of this network was a leader whose lineage traced back to a senator who had once plotted against Caesar during his rise to power. Driven by the weight of their family's history and the suffocating oppression of the present, they penned forbidden texts that circulated among the discontented. These texts combined biting satire with allegory, recounting stories of mythical empires undone by their own hubris. One such text compared the Caesar dynasty to a towering oak that, though mighty, rotted from within. These writings spread across the empire, read in secret gatherings and copied by sympathetic scribes, their words lighting a fire in the hearts of those yearning for change. These writings, rich with allegory and biting critiques, laid bare the paradox of an empire that existed forever but crushed the very spirit of its people. One particularly poignant passage read, "An empire that fears change is one that drowns in its own permanence." The final confrontation unfolded within the shadow of the Colossus of Caesar, a monument taller than any structure of the ancient world. The Colossus, with its towering bronze visage of Caesar, loomed over the city, its gleaming surface reflecting the sun's rays as if to declare the eternal presence of the empire. Constructed over decades, it was a marvel of engineering, with intricate carvings depicting Caesar's greatest triumphs along its base. To the rebels, it was not just a monument, but a taunting reminder of the oppression they endured, a symbol of the arrogance that had replaced the ideals of the Republic. Its destruction, they believed, would send an unignorable message to Rome's citizens and rulers alike. The rebels chose this site deliberately, knowing its destruction would strike at the heart of the empire's identity. Crowds gathered in secret to witness the act of defiance, their whispers mingling with the crackle of torches and the distant sound of marching legions. The rebels ignited a spark of rebellion that spread like wildfire. Their ideas, carried by messengers and encoded in clandestine songs and plays, resonated deeply with oppressed citizens across the provinces. One such play, performed in secret, told the story of a shepherd who toppled a tyrant by rallying the forgotten and downtrodden. Songs, passed from village to village, spoke of stars breaking free from the heavens, a veiled metaphor for liberation from the Caesar dynasty. These forms of resistance became lifelines of hope, their messages spreading faster than the empire's forces could suppress them. In distant corners of the empire, from the rocky shores of Britannia to the sands of Egypt, Caesar's forces struggled to quell the uprisings. Entire legions defected, inspired by the possibility of a freer world, and the rebellion gained momentum faster than the empire could react. Caesar's ultimate paradox became clear in the chaos. An eternal empire bound by rigid control could only survive by sacrificing freedom and the very progress it once promised. For the first time, even Caesar's most loyal advisors began to question the cost of maintaining such a fragile and oppressive system. Caesar himself, though defiant, was haunted by the sight of the Colossus crumbling, the screams of rebellion echoing in the streets. The realization of his empire's brittleness struck him like a mortal wound, leaving him to wonder if he had built an empire destined to fall under its own weight. As the Colossus fell, its massive structure reduced to rubble, the empire's foundations quaked. For the first time, the unyielding Caesar dynasty faced the undeniable truth that no legacy, no matter how powerful, could endure without the will of its people. The Colossus of Caesar crumbled, its massive bronze visage collapsing with a deafening roar that echoed across the city as the rebellion reached its peak. Shards of its once imposing structure scattered through the streets, mingling with the triumphant cries of the gathered crowds. The fall of the Colossus became a defining moment, a seismic shift that rippled across the empire as a declaration that no ruler, no matter how powerful, could withstand the united will of the people. The empire fractured, its foundations splintering as provinces broke away, inspired by the rebels' message of freedom. From the distant hills of Hispania, where farmers turned their tools into weapons, to the bustling ports of Alexandria, where dockworkers openly defied imperial decrees, the cry for liberation surged through the empire like an unstoppable storm, overwhelming the remnants of Caesar's control. In Rome, the streets, silent for centuries under the oppressive weight of imperial decree, erupted with voices reclaiming their freedom. Citizens, emboldened by the rebellion's triumph, tore down statues and imperial banners, replacing them with handmade symbols of unity and hope. Bonfires blazed in the city squares, fueled by fragments of imperial insignia and relics of tyranny. Their smoke spiraled into the skies, mingling with cheers that seemed to echo through the ruins of once untouchable power. The air buzzed with a chaotic mix of jubilation and uncertainty. Families embraced, neighbors cheered, and for the first time in generations, music filled the streets, played by those who had long been silenced by fear. People dared to envision a future free from the shadow of the Caesar dynasty, their imaginations running wild with dreams of shared power and renewed purpose, even as the path forward remained shrouded in challenges. As the chaos unfolded, a lone figure stood atop the ruins of the Senate, their silhouette stark against the fiery hues of the sunrise. The dawn painted the fractured yet liberated city in hues of gold and crimson, illuminating the shattered marble columns and the scars of rebellion etched into the heart of Rome. This figure, cloaked in the dust of the fallen empire, gazed out over the city, a silent sentinel to the dawn of a new era. Their stance reflected both the weariness of prolonged struggle and the quiet determination of a people ready to reclaim their destiny. The empire had crumbled, but for the first time in centuries, the people had risen, their voices blending into a chorus of defiance and hope, unrelenting in their demand for change. Julius Caesar's legacy endured, not as an eternal ruler, but as a cautionary tale etched indelibly into the annals of history. His boundless ambition had forged an empire of immense power, but at the devastating cost of the freedom and progress that had once defined Rome. His name, immortalized not in reverence but as a warning, stood as a testament to the perilous balance between control and liberty, and the catastrophic price paid when that balance is forsaken. The shattered remains of his empire became a monument to the resilience of the human spirit, an enduring symbol of the power to overcome even the most unyielding of oppressions, paving the way for a future defined by the collective will of its people rather than the decrees of a single ruler. The dawn of this new age, marked by the fall of tyranny, promised a world where the voices of many could finally shape their shared destiny.